The gun was heavier than I expected. It rested in my shaking hands, cold and unforgiving, while the man across the table watched me with unsettling calm. He didn't rush me. He didn't threaten me again. He didn't need to. The silence did the work for him. Behind me, through a half-closed door, my daughter slept peacefully, unaware that her life was being negotiated in the quietest room of the most dangerous house in the city. "Choose," he said softly at last. "Pull the trigger, and you walk away alive." He leaned back, eyes dark. "Don't. And she won't." My finger hovered, my breath fractured, my mind screaming for a third option that didn't exist. I had spent my whole life avoiding men like him. Power like his destroyed people like me. So why was the most feared man in this city giving me a choice? And why did it feel like no matter what I chose, I had already lost? The moment the gun touched my palm, I knew this story would never begin the way love stories were supposed to. But that night, months earlier, none of that existed yet. There was no gun, no blood, no impossible choice. There was only music, low lights, and a woman who still believed her life was small enough to control. Elena had never imagined that a single evening could fracture her future so quietly. She was just a night singer at a modest jazz club tucked between a closed bookstore and a bakery that smelled like burnt sugar after midnight. She sang because it paid the rent. She sang because her daughter needed milk in the fridge and shoes that didn't pinch her toes. Dreams had been folded away long ago, pressed flat under responsibility. Music was no longer hope. It was survival. That night, the club was half full, the air thick with smoke and murmured conversations. Elena stepped onto the small stage, adjusted the microphone, and let her voice do what it always did. It softened the room, bent it inward. People stopped talking. Glasses paused halfway to lips. Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried something raw, something unguarded, like a confession whispered too late. She didn't notice him at first. He sat in the VIP booth at the far corner, half-shadowed, flanked by men who looked less like friends and more like sentinels, while others swayed or smiled. He did neither. He didn't clap when she finished her first song. He didn't look away when the applause erupted. His gaze stayed fixed on her, sharp and measuring, as if he were memorizing her rather than enjoying her. Elena felt it midway through her second song, that strange awareness of being watched not with desire, but with intent. Her voice wavered for a fraction of a second before she steadied it, fingers tightening around the mic stand. She told herself it was nothing. Wealthy men came and went. Power always liked to sit in dark corners. She finished her set, bowed politely, and disappeared backstage, heart beating a little too fast. After the final note faded and the crowd thinned, Marco, the club manager, found her near the dressing mirror. His expression was careful, the way it always was when trouble wore a pleasant face. "There's a gentleman who wants to meet you," he said, privately. Elena didn't hesitate. "No," Marco sighed. "He's important." She met her own reflection. Smoothed lipstick she couldn't afford to replace. Then he can be important somewhere else. She reached for her coat. "That won't be necessary." The voice came from behind her, calm and unhurried. Elena turned. The man from the booth stood just inside the doorway, impeccably dressed, dark suit tailored with quiet arrogance. Up close, his presence was heavier, like gravity had shifted in the room. His face was composed, almost elegant, but his eyes were unreadable, dark with something that felt older than ambition. "I apologize for intruding," he said smoothly. "I won't take much of your time." Elena forced a polite smile, every instinct screaming caution. "I'm finished for the night, I know." His gaze flicked briefly to the clock on the wall. "You finish at 11? Every night except Sunday." Her smile stiffened. "You sang tonight as if your heart was breaking," he continued. Tone conversational, almost gentle. "I'd like to hear you sing again. For me, somewhere quieter." Elena let out a breath that was almost a laugh. "I don't do private performances. I'm not asking you to," he said. "I'm offering—" She was about to refuse again when he spoke once more, his voice unchanged, as if discussing the weather. "Your daughter's name is Maya. She's 6. You live on the 3rd floor of a walk-up on Delancey Street. The hallway light has been flickering for 2 months, and the landlord keeps promising to fix it." The room went cold. Elena felt it in her spine first, a sharp, instinctive chill. Her hand tightened around her coat. She waited for the threat to come. For the smile to turn cruel? It didn't. He studied her reaction with clinical interest, then offered a small nod, as if confirming something to himself. "Don't be afraid," he said quietly. "If I meant you harm, you wouldn't be standing here." That somehow frightened her more than any threat could have. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked, keeping her voice steady through sheer force of will. "Because honesty saves time." He reached into his jacket and withdrew a card, holding it out between two fingers. "And because you deserve to know who is speaking to you." She hesitated before taking it. Dante Russo. The name sat on the card in clean, understated lettering. No title, no company, just a name that carried weight Elena couldn't yet measure. She had heard it before, in fragments, in whispers that stopped when she entered a room, a name associated with money that never ran out and problems that never stayed buried. Her pulse thundered in her ears. "I'm not interested in whatever this is," she said, though her voice betrayed her. "I have a child." Something flickered in his eyes at that. Not surprise, something closer to recognition. "So do I," he replied, and for the first time, his voice lost a degree of its polish. Or rather, "I did." Silence stretched between them, fragile and electric. Dante stepped back, giving her space she hadn't asked for. "I won't pressure you tonight," he said. "Think about my offer. I'll be in touch." He turned to leave, then paused at the door. "And Elena," he added softly, without looking back. "From this moment on, some people will notice you. If anything feels wrong, call me." The door closed behind him. Elena stood frozen, the card trembling in her hand, heart racing as realization sank in. She had been seen, not as background, not as invisible, but as something worth watching. And the man who had noticed her was someone she had spent her entire life avoiding. If this story touched your heart, follow the channel to enjoy many more heart-stirring stories every week. Elena did not sleep that night. Dante Russo's name lingered in her mind like a bruise she couldn't stop touching. She replayed every second of their encounter, searching for the moment she should have walked away faster, spoken sharper, protected herself better. But beneath the fear, there was something else she refused to name: curiosity and a dangerous sense of being seen. The card stayed on her kitchen counter for 2 days. She didn't move it. She didn't throw it away. It lay there beside unpaid bills and a cracked mug, out of place in her small apartment, heavy with implication. Every time she passed it, she felt the same pull she felt standing too close to a ledge. By the third evening, Elena understood the truth she had been avoiding, whether she called Dante or not. Her life had already shifted. The message came first, short, precise, an address overlooking the sea. A time, no pressure, no threat, just an assumption that she would come. Elena almost didn't. She kissed Maya's forehead as she tucked her into bed, listening to her daughter's steady breathing, memorizing the warmth of her small hand wrapped around Elena's finger. This was why she hesitated. Not because she was afraid of Dante Russo, but because she was afraid of what stepping into his world might cost her child. In the end, she went. The car waiting outside her building was black, discreet, driven by a man who spoke only to confirm her name. Elena watched the city slide past the window, her reflection pale and tense against the glass. The farther they drove, the quieter everything became, until noise gave way to the steady hush of waves breaking below cliffs. The house was nothing like she expected. No glaring lights, no ostentatious guards. It rose from the rock like it belonged there, all clean lines and open glass, the ocean stretching endlessly beyond it. Dante met her at the door himself, dressed simply, without the intimidating armor of the club. For a moment, he looked almost ordinary. "Thank you for coming," he said. "I haven't agreed to anything," Elena replied. A faint smile touched his mouth. "I wouldn't expect you to." Inside, the house felt lived in, not staged. Books lined the walls, art that didn't scream money but taste. And in the center of a wide room overlooking the sea stood a grand piano, black and gleaming, waiting. "This is where I'd like you to sing," Dante said. "If you choose to?" Elena approached the piano slowly, fingers hovering just above its polished surface. "You don't even know if I'll say yes." "I do," he answered calmly. "Because you wouldn't be here if you weren't at least considering it." She hated that he was right. Dinner was simple, no extravagance. They spoke of music, of places neither of them had time to visit anymore. Dante listened more than he talked, his attention focused, unsettling in its intensity. He did not ask about Maya. He did not probe. It was restraint that made Elena uneasy. Afterward, she sang. The room seemed to shrink around her voice, the ocean outside fading into a distant rhythm. She sang as she always did, but something in the space changed it. When she finished, silence followed, deep and unbroken. Dante did not applaud. He stood instead, eyes dark, I lost my daughter, he said quietly. 16 years ago. Elena's breath caught. I don't tell people that. He continued, but tonight felt appropriate. She understood then. This was not a transaction. It was a confession disguised as an invitation. When she left later, escorted back into the night, Elena believed she had survived the encounter intact. She was wrong. The next day at the club, Marco pulled her aside, his face tense. 2 men came looking for you, he said, asking questions. Russians, I think. Her stomach dropped. I didn't tell them anything, Marco added quickly. But Russo's people showed up 20 minutes later, asked the same questions, made it clear you were off limits. Elena's heart began to pound. Dante had acted without telling her, protected her without asking. That evening, her phone buzzed. A single message from Dante. You should know. There are others watching now. She stared at the screen, anger and fear tangling in her chest. This was the price. Not money, not favors, visibility. When she called him, her voice shook despite her effort. You said you wouldn't pressure me. I didn't. He replied evenly. I informed you. You've made me a target. He was silent for a beat. No. He said, you were already one. I simply stepped between you and them. Elena realized then that the safety she felt was conditional, temporary, and attached to a man whose world was built on danger. She hung up without saying goodbye, her thoughts racing. For the first time, she questioned not whether Dante Russo was dangerous, but whether walking away from him would be even more so. And somewhere deep inside, beneath the fear, another realization took shape, one she refused to confront just yet. She was no longer certain she wanted to walk away at all. Elena began to notice the changes in small, unsettling ways. The flickering hallway light outside her apartment was fixed without warning. The unfamiliar sedan that had been idling across the street for weeks disappeared overnight. When she walked Maya to school, she sensed eyes on them, not predatory, but watchful, disciplined, protection. She realized, the kind that did not ask permission. At first, she told herself it was coincidence. Cities repaired things. People came and went. But the truth pressed in from all sides, quiet and relentless. Dante Russo had extended his shadow over her life, and whether she welcomed it or not, it was there. The club felt different too. The air tighter. Conversations hushed when Elena entered. Marco avoided her eyes, guilt flickering across his face, when she confronted him. He confessed that men had been asking about her schedule, her routines, the nights she stayed late. He hadn't answered. Neither had anyone else. Someone had made sure of that. Elena's anger burned hot and sharp, cutting through the fear. She called Dante that night, pacing her kitchen, Maya asleep behind a closed door. He answered on the first ring. You're rearranging my life, she said, skipping any pretense. You didn't ask. I didn't need to, he replied evenly. They were getting closer. You decided that for me? Yes. The certainty in his voice unsettled her more than the words themselves. I am not something you get to manage, she said, lowering her voice so it wouldn't carry down the hallway. I have a daughter, I'm aware. That answer snapped something inside her. Then stop, she demanded. Pull back, whatever this is. There was a pause, brief but weighted. I can't, Dante said quietly. Not anymore. She hung up before he could explain, her hands trembling as she leaned against the counter. She wanted to believe she was still in control, but control was an illusion she could no longer afford. The next afternoon, Elena learned the cost of his protection. Marco took her aside again, his face drawn. He canceled the deal. He said, What deal? A private event? Big money. It would have put the club on the map. He hesitated. Russo pulled out, said he wouldn't bring certain people into the same space as you. The words struck harder than Elena expected. She understood what that meant. Dante had chosen her safety over profit, over alliances she didn't fully grasp. She hadn't asked him to. She hadn't wanted that kind of leverage. That night, she drove to the cliffs herself. The house greeted her with the same quiet dignity, but this time, the calm felt deceptive. Dante met her in the open room, the ocean a dark expanse beyond the glass. He seemed unsurprised to see her, as if he had been waiting. You crossed a line, Elena said, not bothering to sit. You lost something because of me. I lost nothing I couldn't replace. He answered. That's not the point. No, he agreed. It isn't. He studied her for a long moment, then gestured for her to follow. They stopped before a wall of framed photographs she hadn't noticed before. Dante removed one without ceremony and handed it to her. A teenage girl stared back, her smile bright, unguarded. My daughter, Dante said. Sophia. Elena's breath caught. She looks Nothing like me, he finished. She was stubborn. Reckless. She hated that I worried. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. I couldn't protect her from everything. That's a failure I don't intend to repeat. The weight of his confession settled heavily between them. Elena understood then that his actions were not about control, but penance, protection as redemption. You don't get to rewrite your past through me, she said softly. I know, Dante replied, but I can choose who I become next. She wanted to resist him, to draw a clean line and retreat to the fragile safety of ignorance. But every instinct told her the danger was already inside her walls. Walking away would not erase it. What do they want, she asked. Leverage, he said. You. The truth landed like a blow. Elena swallowed. Then you're making it worse by standing so close, or I'm making it harder for them to touch you. She left soon after, her thoughts in turmoil. On the drive home, she realized the world she'd known had narrowed, closing in around her until only two options remained. Accept Dante's protection, with all its unspoken costs, or face a threat she did not yet understand alone. That night, she stood in Maya's doorway long after her daughter fell asleep, watching the gentle rise and fall of her chest. Elena knew then that love, real love, was not gentle or safe. It was ruthless in its demands. And for the first time, she wondered if Dante Russo was not the danger she needed to escape, but the storm she might have to weather to keep her child alive. The first time Maya asked about Dante, Elena knew the boundary she had been pretending still existed was already gone. Is he your friend? Her daughter asked one morning, swinging her backpack onto her shoulders as Elena knelt to zip it closed. The man who sends the nice car sometimes. Elena's fingers paused. She forced a smile. He's someone who helps Mommy. Maya considered this with the unsettling seriousness only children possessed. He looks sad, she said simply, but not scary. That sentence stayed with Elena long after she watched her daughter disappear through the school gates. Not scary. It was a word she had never associated with men like Dante Russo, and yet it unsettled her precisely because part of her agreed. The sense of pressure intensified that week. Not loud, not obvious. It came in fragments. A stranger lingering too long across the street. A black car that followed her for 3 blocks before turning away. A phone call that disconnected the moment she answered. Each incident alone meant nothing. Together, they formed a pattern that tightened around her chest. Dante noticed before she said a word. They're testing distances. He told her over the phone one evening, his voice controlled but alert. Timing. Reactions. You promised me transparency, Elena replied, anger sharp beneath her fear. This doesn't feel like it. I promised honesty. He corrected. Not comfort. She closed her eyes, steadying her breath. Then be honest. How bad is it? A pause, short, deliberate. They know about Maya. The world tilted. Elena gripped the edge of the counter, her knees weakening. How they've been watching you longer than you realize, Dante said. Longer than I have. That truth was worse than any threat. The idea that danger had been circling her life silently, unnoticed, made her feel exposed in a way she could not shake. Why didn't you tell me sooner, she whispered. Because fear makes people run. He answered. And running would put you directly in their path. Her anger flared. So you decided for me again? Yes. She expected the admission to enrage her further. Instead, it hollowed her out. Elena understood then that Dante did not see himself as her savior. He saw himself as the last barrier before something inevitable. That night, Dante insisted they meet, not at the house on the cliffs, but somewhere neutral, public. He chose a quiet cafe overlooking the water, its windows fogged by salt air. Elena arrived tense, scanning faces, calculating exits. Dante was already there, seated with his back to the wall, his gaze lifting the moment she entered. You shouldn't have come alone, he said. I'm not a prisoner, she replied. Sitting across from him? No, he agreed softly. Your leverage. The word stung because it was true. He slid his phone across the table. On the screen was a photo taken from across the street from Maya's school. Grainy, distant, indisputable. Elena's throat tightened. They won't move yet, Dante said. They want to see how I respond. And how are you responding? I'm drawing lines. She laughed bitterly. You're painting targets. Dante leaned forward, lowering his voice. I'm forcing them to choose. If they come after you, they come after me. That's a war they can't afford. And if they don't care, Elena challenged. For the first time, uncertainty flickered across his face. Then we adapt. The meeting ended without resolution. Elena returned home shaken, her nerves stretched thin. She barely slept, jumping at every sound, every shadow. The next morning, the call came. A man's voice, calm, accented. He addressed her by name, pronounced correctly. He mentioned Maya's teacher, the color of her lunchbox, the way she skipped the last step on the stairs. "I just want to talk," the voice said pleasantly. "Your friend Dante is territorial. It complicates things." Elena hung up without responding, her hands trembling violently. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She went into Maya's room and sat on the floor beside the bed until her breathing slowed enough to think. When Dante arrived minutes later, summoned by a single text, Elena did not raise her voice. She did not accuse. She simply looked at him and said, "You knew this would happen." "Yes, and you still let me bring my child into your orbit." "I didn't bring her," he replied. "The world did." The silence between them stretched, heavy with unsaid things. Elena realized that Dante's presence, however dangerous, had become a shield she no longer knew how to lower. Later that evening, Maya met him properly. Dante crouched to her height, his posture careful, respectful. Maya studied him openly, unafraid. "Mommy says you help us," she said. "I try," Dante replied. "Are you going to stay?" she asked. Elena's heart clenched. Dante glanced at Elena before answering. "As long as I'm needed." Maya smiled, satisfied, and returned to her toys. The simplicity of her trust struck Elena with painful force. Children did not understand danger. They sensed intention. That night, after Maya was asleep, Elena stood on the balcony of Dante's house, the ocean black and endless below. Dante joined her, his presence solid at her side. "If I ask you to step back," she said quietly, "will you?" He was silent for a long moment. No, the honesty should have frightened her. Instead, it steadied something inside her. "Then I need to know," Elena said, turning to face him. "If this gets worse, will you still choose us?" Dante met her gaze without hesitation. There is no choice anymore. Elena understood the weight of that promise. Protection, once offered, could not be withdrawn without consequence. And for the first time, she accepted the truth she had been resisting since the night they met. Her life was no longer her own to shield quietly. It was entangled with his enemies, with his past. And the greatest danger was no longer being noticed by the wrong man, but loving the one who refused to let her go. The morning after Maya met Dante, Elena woke with the uneasy sense that something irreversible had shifted. It was not fear that lingered in her chest, but awareness, the kind that sharpened every sound, every movement, every silence between breaths. She had crossed from being protected to being involved, and there was no longer a clean way back. Dante did not call. He did not send a car. The absence felt deliberate, respectful in a way that unsettled her more than his constant presence ever had. Elena went through the motions of the day on instinct alone, walking Maya to school, exchanging polite smiles with other parents, all the while feeling as though she were moving through a glass enclosure, visible from every angle. At the club that night, the atmosphere was wrong. Marco met her at the door, his face pale, eyes darting past her shoulder. They came again, he said quietly. Different men this time. Didn't ask questions, just watched. Elena's throat tightened. "Did you call him?" Marco nodded. Before I could finish my sentence, his people were already here. She stepped onto the stage with her nerves pulled taut. The room was full, but the applause felt distant, hollow. As she sang, her gaze swept the crowd, searching for anything out of place. When she spotted a man near the bar holding his phone at an odd angle, something cold slid down her spine. After the set, her phone vibrated. Unknown number. "You sing beautifully when you're afraid." Her blood ran cold. She didn't reply. She didn't have to. Another message followed seconds later. "Your daughter had strawberry milk today. She spilled some on her sleeve." Elena's hands began to shake so violently she nearly dropped the phone. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She walked to the back hallway, locked herself in the storage room, and called Dante. He answered immediately. "They contacted you." He said, not a question. "They're watching Maya," Elena whispered, her voice breaking for the first time. "They know things they shouldn't." "I'm moving you tonight," Dante said. "No," she replied sharply. "You don't get to decide that." A pause. Heavy. Controlled. "Then tell me what you want." The question stunned her. Dante Russo did not ask permission. He calculated outcomes, and yet, here he was, waiting. Elena pressed her forehead to the cool metal shelf, forcing herself to breathe. "I want my daughter safe," she said. "Not hidden, not running, safe. That requires proximity," Dante replied. To me, silence stretched between them, taut as wire. Elena understood then that this was the choice she had been circling since the beginning. Not whether to trust Dante, but whether to stand close enough to be protected by him openly. She hung up without answering. An hour later, the decision was made for her. As Elena walked out of the club, a black sedan rolled to a stop at the curb, the window lowered just enough to reveal a man she had never seen before. His expression polite, almost amused. "Ms. Alvarez?" he said smoothly. "My employer would like a word." She stepped back instinctively. Before she could move further, another car slid in behind her. Doors opened. Men emerged. Not Dante's. The standoff lasted less than 10 seconds. A third vehicle appeared, stopping abruptly between her and the sedan. Dante stepped out, his presence cutting through the tension like a blade. He did not raise his voice. He did not threaten. He simply looked at the other men, and something in his gaze made them retreat. When it was over, Elena found herself pressed against his chest, her hands gripping his coat without realizing when she had moved. Dante held her steady, one arm firm around her shoulders, his jaw set with restrained fury. "They crossed a line," he said quietly. "Now they'll push harder." Elena pulled back, meeting his eyes. "Then I choose," she said. "Not you. Me." He waited. "I'll stay close," she continued. "I'll accept your protection. But I won't be a secret, and I won't let Maya be hidden away like a liability." Dante studied her, something like admiration flickering beneath the darkness in his gaze. "That's dangerous." "I know," Elena said. "So is loving someone who lives in shadows." The admission hung between them, fragile and electric. Dante reached up slowly, brushing his thumb against her cheek, stopping just short of intimacy. "If you stay," he said, "there will be no illusion of safety, only honesty." "I can live with that," she replied. "I can't live with fear pretending to be peace." That night, Elena and Maya moved into Dante's house on the cliffs. Not hidden, not disguised, visible. As Maya explored her new room, laughing in wonder at the ocean stretching endlessly beyond the windows, Elena stood in the doorway, watching her daughter's joy clash painfully with the knowledge of what this choice meant. Dante appeared beside her, his voice low. "You've just declared a side." Elena nodded. "I know." She did not yet realize that by choosing proximity, she had become more than leverage. She had become the line no one was allowed to cross. Life inside Dante Russo's house did not slow down the danger. It sharpened it. Elena felt it immediately. The rhythm of the place was different from the fragile calm of her apartment. Here, time moved with purpose. Footsteps were measured. Doors closed softly but decisively. Conversations stopped when she entered. Not out of suspicion, but respect. That realization unsettled her more than fear ever had. Maya adapted faster than Elena expected. Children always did. She claimed the room overlooking the ocean as if it had been waiting for her, lining her toys along the window ledge, waving at the waves like they were old friends. Elena watched from the doorway, heart aching at the normalcy of it. Safety, she learned, was not the absence of danger. It was the presence of vigilance. Dante did not hover. He gave Elena space, something that surprised her. He checked in through quiet gestures rather than commands. A security briefing left deliberately open on the desk. A route change explained without insistence. Information offered, not imposed. It was his way of honoring the boundary she had drawn. But the house itself was never still. Elena noticed the meetings first. Men arriving at odd hours, leaving with faces set in grim resolve. Names spoken in low voices. Places she had never been mentioned as if they were chess squares. Dante moved through these gatherings with effortless authority, his presence commanding attention without force. Watching him, Elena understood why others feared him. Power clung to him like a second skin. She also saw what it cost. Late one night, she found him alone in his study, shoulders tense as he stared at a screen filled with figures and names she did not understand. He did not look up when she entered. "You're bleeding," she said quietly. He glanced down at his hand, a thin cut across his knuckles. "Nothing." Elena took his hand anyway, cleaning the wound with practiced gentleness. He let her. The intimacy of the moment startled them both. "They're pressuring you," she said. "Yes. Because of me. Because of my choices," Dante corrected. "You're only the line that made them visible." That truth settled heavily between them. Elena realized then that her presence was not weakening Dante. It was forcing him to confront parts of his world he had long accepted as immutable. The pressure escalated days later. Elena overheard raised voices through the open balcony doors. Dante stood with two men she recognized as senior figures in his organization. Their words were sharp, urgent. "You're pulling out of too much," one of them said. "We look weak." Dante's reply was calm. "We look careful. This woman is changing you." Dante did not deny it. When the men left, Elena remained where she was, uncertain whether to retreat or speak. Dante turned to her, his expression unreadable. "You shouldn't have heard that," he said. "I needed to," Elena replied. He studied her for a long moment. "Staying close has consequences," he said. "Not just for you." "I know," she answered. "That's why I'm still here." That night, the threat became personal. Elena's phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. A single photo. Maya in the schoolyard, laughing, sunlight in her hair. No context, no words, just the image. Elena felt the world narrow to a pinpoint of clarity. She did not panic. She walked to Dante's study and placed the phone on his desk. "They're reminding us," she said. Dante's jaw tightened. "They're testing you." "No," Elena corrected. "They're testing whether I'll break." He looked at her sharply. "And will you—" She met his gaze, steady. No, something shifted then, subtle but profound. Dante saw it too. This was no longer a woman being protected. This was a mother choosing to stand in the line of fire. That night, Dante made a decision that sent shockwaves through his world. He severed a partnership that had sustained part of his empire for years. Legitimate on the surface, poison beneath it. The fallout was immediate. Calls unanswered. Meetings canceled. Allies questioning loyalty. Elena watched it unfold, understanding that each step Dante took away from his old life was a step toward uncertainty. "You don't have to do this," she said quietly. "Yes," he replied. "I do." Why Dante hesitated, then answered with a truth he rarely allowed himself. "Because I refuse to teach your daughter that power is more important than people." The admission struck Elena harder than any threat. She saw then the man beneath the reputation, scarred but striving, reshaping himself through acts that could not be undone. The twist came from within. One of the security reports revealed inconsistencies, access logs that did not align, routes altered without authorization. Someone close was leaking information. Someone trusted. Elena read the report twice, her pulse steady. "It's not them," she said. "It's inside." Dante nodded slowly. "I know." The realization tightened the circle of danger. The enemy was no longer just outside the walls. It was already among them. That night, as Elena stood watching the ocean swallow the moonlight, Dante joined her, his presence familiar now in a way that frightened her more than it comforted. "If this gets worse," she said quietly. "I won't run. I wouldn't let you," he replied, just as softly. She turned to him. "That's not what I meant. I'll stand." He met her gaze, something fierce and reverent crossing his features. "Then so will I." They stood together in silence, bound not by illusion or promises, but by a shared understanding. Whatever was coming next would demand more than protection. It would demand sacrifice. The realization that the danger was already inside the house changed everything. Elena felt it in the way the corridors seemed narrower, the silence heavier. Trust, once given freely under Dante's roof, became a currency rationed with care. Conversations lowered, eyes lingered. Even footsteps sounded different, as if the walls themselves were listening. Dante did not announce his suspicions. He never did. Instead, the house tightened quietly around its secrets. Security rotations shifted. Access points were rerouted. Information was compartmentalized. Elena watched the process unfold with a clarity that surprised her. Fear had sharpened her instincts, not dulled them. The message arrived 3 days later. No number, no greeting. Warehouse district, midnight. Come alone. Elena stared at the screen, her pulse steady in a way that felt almost unnatural. She didn't need to ask who it was from. She also didn't need to ask what would happen if she refused. She deleted the message and went to Maya's room. Her daughter was asleep, sprawled diagonally across the bed, one arm flung over a stuffed whale Dante had bought her without comment. Elena sat on the edge of the mattress, smoothing Maya's hair back, memorizing the warmth of her skin, the quiet certainty of her breathing. This was the truth beneath everything. Not power, not fear. Choice. Elena made hers. She didn't tell Dante. Instead, she prepared with deliberate calm. She left a note on the kitchen counter, hidden beneath a stack of mail, brief and unmistakable. "If I'm not back by morning, trust no one, not even me." She dressed simply, dark clothes that wouldn't draw attention. Before leaving,
She paused at Dante's study door, listening to the low murmur of voices within. He was in a meeting. Good. She slipped out unnoticed, the ocean wind sharp against her face as she descended the path to the waiting car she had arranged herself. The warehouse loomed like a scar against the city skyline. Lights sparse, shadows deep.
Elena stepped inside alone, every sense alert. The air smelled of rust and oil. Footsteps echoed in the distance. He emerged from the shadows with an easy smile. Hands visible, posture relaxed. Volkov was not as tall as Elena expected, not as imposing. His power radiated not from size, but certainty. "You came," he said. "That's good. It means you understand leverage." "I understand mothers," Elena replied evenly, "and men who hide behind threats." Volkov laughed softly. "Brave words. Dante's influence? Perhaps no," she said. "Mine." He studied her with renewed interest. "You're more valuable than I realized." "That's why I'm here," Elena said. "You want him to move? I want my daughter safe." Volkov tilted his head. "Safety is temporary. So is power." Elena countered. "You know that better than anyone." The negotiation unfolded like a slow dance. Volkov circled, probing, testing. Elena held her ground, revealing nothing Dante hadn't already assumed they knew. Time stretched, minutes bled into hours. What Volkov didn't know was that Elena was not buying peace. She was buying time. At the house on the cliffs, Dante felt the shift before he found the note. An absence in the air, a silence that rang too loud. When he read her words, something cold and precise settled in his chest. "She's gone," he said quietly. The house erupted into motion. Dante did not shout. He did not panic. Orders flowed from him with lethal clarity. Teams deployed, routes triangulated. But beneath the control burned a fury he could barely contain. Elena had walked into the trap he had spent weeks trying to dismantle. By the time Dante reached the warehouse, the situation had already fractured. Gunfire shattered the night. Elena hit the ground as chaos exploded around her, heart pounding, mind sharp. She crawled behind a crate, breath steady despite the noise. This was what she had prepared for. Not heroics, survival. Dante stormed through the entrance like a force of nature, his presence shifting the balance instantly. Volkov retreated, curses echoing as he disappeared deeper into the building. The confrontation was swift and brutal. When it ended, Volkov lay wounded but alive, pinned beneath Dante's boot, blood darkening his shoulder. Elena rose slowly, her body trembling now that the danger had passed. Dante turned to her, fury and relief warring in his eyes. "What were you thinking?" he demanded, voice rough. "She threatened Maya," Elena said simply. "I couldn't wait." Understanding cut through his anger, leaving something raw behind. He pulled her into him, holding her with a force that spoke of fear he would never admit aloud. "You should have trusted me," he said against her hair. "I trusted you," Elena replied. "That's why I went." Sirens wailed in the distance as Dante's men secured the perimeter. Volkov laughed weakly from the ground. "You see," he rasped. "She's not yours to protect. She's yours to lose." Dante's expression hardened as he turned back to his enemy. Elena watched them, realizing the truth that would change everything. She was no longer bait. She was the catalyst, and nothing in Dante Russo's world would ever be the same again. The aftermath did not feel like victory. The warehouse still smelled of gunpowder and rust, the echo of sirens fading into the distance as Dante's men secured the perimeter. Elena stood near a concrete pillar, arms wrapped tightly around herself, her body only now allowing the tremor she had held back. Volkov was alive, restrained, his blood staining the floor in a dark, spreading pattern. That fact alone unsettled her. Nothing was finished while he still breathed. Dante moved with controlled precision, issuing orders in low, clipped tones. When he finally turned back to Elena, the fury in his eyes had cooled into something more dangerous. Fear, sharpened by responsibility. He approached her slowly, as if sudden movement might fracture what little balance remained. "You were hurt," he said, scanning her face, her hands, the way she held herself. "I'm fine," Elena replied, though her voice was thinner than she intended. "Maya, she's safe," Dante said immediately. "I would never have left her exposed." Relief hit Elena like a delayed wave. Her knees weakened, and Dante caught her before she fell, his arm firm around her waist. For a brief moment, she let herself lean into him, the solidity of his presence grounding her. Then she pulled back, searching his face. "He said something," she whispered. "Before you came?" Dante's jaw tightened. "What did he say? That I'd been watched before you noticed me?" The words tasted bitter, that I was already in his sight. Dante didn't respond right away. He turned, gesturing for his men to take Volkov away. When they were alone again, he spoke quietly. He's lying. Or telling half the truth. He wants doubt to rot what you trust, but you didn't deny it. Elena pressed. Dante met her gaze. Because the truth is more complicated than denial. They returned to the house on the cliffs under a sky just beginning to pale with dawn. The sea below was restless, waves crashing against rock with tireless insistence. Inside, the house felt changed, as if it too had survived something violent and could not return to what it had been before. Elena went straight to Maya's room. Her daughter slept curled around the stuffed whale, unaware of how close danger had come. Elena knelt beside the bed, pressing her forehead lightly to the mattress, breathing in the familiar scent of her child. Tears came silently, hot and relentless. Grief and gratitude tangled together. When she rose, Dante stood in the doorway, watching her with an expression she could not read. "We need to talk," he said. They sat in the kitchen as morning light crept across the floor. No guards, no interruptions. Just truth, finally stripped of illusion. "I did notice you before we met," Dante said, his voice steady, not as a target, as a variable. Elena's chest tightened. "Explain." "There were inquiries," he continued. "A singer at a small club, a single mother with no obvious leverage. It didn't add up. I had you checked. And when you realized there was nothing she asked, I realized someone else had already been looking." The words landed hard. "I stepped closer," Dante said, because distance was no longer an option. Elena absorbed this in silence. She had not been chosen at random, but neither had she been chosen maliciously. She had been noticed because she existed in a world that devoured the unnoticed. "You didn't tell me," she said quietly. "No," Dante admitted, "because knowing sooner would not have protected you. It would have only made you afraid." Elena stood, pacing slowly. "Fear didn't make me weak," she said. "It made me act." Dante watched her, something like pride flickering briefly in his eyes. "Yes," he said, "it did." The consequences arrived before either of them could say more. News traveled fast in Dante's world. Volkov's capture fractured alliances, destabilized arrangements that had held for years. Calls came in waves. Demands. Warnings. Ultimatums. Dante listened, responded, and in several cases, refused. By nightfall, the cost of his choices became undeniable. One of his oldest partners withdrew support from a legitimate venture, citing risk. Another froze assets, quietly but decisively. Power did not vanish all at once. It eroded, piece by piece. Elena watched this unfold with a mixture of guilt and resolve. "You're losing ground," she said. "I'm shedding it," Dante corrected. "For us. For what I refuse to pass on," he replied. That night, as they stood on the balcony overlooking the sea, Elena finally asked the question she had been carrying since the warehouse. "If it comes down to it," she said, "will you choose your empire or my daughter?" Dante did not hesitate. "Your daughter." The simplicity of the answer broke something open in her chest. The final twist came quietly, without gunfire or threats. A report arrived detailing the leak. The betrayal was not one of Dante's closest men, but someone Elena had spoken to more than once. A face she recognized. A presence she had trusted. The realization sent a chill through her that no ocean wind could match. "The danger isn't finished," Elena said softly, staring at the file. "No," Dante agreed. "But it's clearer now." She looked at him, at the man who was dismantling his world piece by piece to build something uncertain and fragile in its place. Love did not feel like safety anymore. It felt like risk, chosen deliberately. Elena closed the file. "Then we finish it," she said. Dante met her gaze, something fierce and tender colliding in his eyes. Together. Outside, the waves continued their endless assault on stone. And Elena understood, with a clarity that frightened and steadied her in equal measure, that the greatest danger was no longer losing everything she had. It was becoming someone who could no longer pretend to live on the edges of power. The city did not explode into chaos after Volkov's fall. It fractured quietly. Elena felt the shift in subtler ways than gunfire or sirens. Invitations stopped arriving. Certain doors closed without explanation. Names that once carried weight suddenly became liabilities. Dante's world was recalibrating, and every recalculation carried a cost. The traitor was contained within 48 hours. Dante did not allow Elena to witness the confrontation. He never would. But she saw the aftermath in his eyes when he returned home that night, the way something had hardened and hollowed at the same time. Betrayal. Elena realized, did not shock men like Dante. It exhausted them. "It's done," he said simply. "For now," Elena replied. He didn't disagree. The threat was no longer a single enemy. It was absence. The vacuum Volkov left behind drew attention from every direction. Smaller factions tested boundaries. Former allies weighed risks. Dante responded with ruthless efficiency, but Elena could see the strain it placed on him. Every decision pulled him further from the empire he had built and closer to a future he had never planned for. And then came the ultimatum. It arrived through channels Elena did not fully understand, but its meaning was clear enough. If Dante continued dismantling certain operations, the retaliation would not target him directly. It would reach for the weakest point available. Maya. Elena read the message twice, her hands steady, her heart pounding with terrifying clarity. There it was, the final line. The line she had known would be drawn from the moment she stepped into Dante's world. Dante found her in Maya's room, sitting on the floor beside the bed, her back against the wall. He knew before she spoke. "They won't stop," Elena said quietly. "Not unless you give them something." "I won't give them you," Dante replied instantly. "I know," she said. "That's why I'm asking for something else." He knelt in front of her, his expression tightening. "Elena." "Listen to me," she interrupted, her voice calm but unyielding. "This isn't about surrender. It's about leverage." Dante stared at her, realization dawning slowly. "No. You taught me how this works," she said. "You taught me that power isn't what you hold. It's what you're willing to lose." Silence stretched between them, heavy with implication. "What are you proposing?" Dante asked finally, his voice low. Elena met his gaze. "You let them believe you're stepping away. Publicly. You dismantle the parts they fear most. You make them think you're retreating from me. And in return, they stop looking at Maya," Elena said. "Because I won't be your weakness anymore. I'll be the reason you walked away." Dante stood abruptly, pacing the room like a caged animal. "That would destroy what's left of my position." "Yes," Elena agreed. "But it would save our daughter." The word slipped out before she could stop it. Their daughter. Dante froze. Slowly, he turned back to her, something raw and unguarded breaking through the armor he wore so effortlessly. "Say that again?" Elena swallowed. "Maya already thinks of you as family." "And her voice faltered, then steadied. "I trust you with her life. That makes you more than a protector." Emotion flickered across Dante's face, quickly mastered. "If I do this," he said, "there's no going back." Elena rose to her feet, standing in front of him, close enough to feel his breath. "Then don't go back." The decision was made by morning. Dante moved with calculated precision, executing the most dangerous maneuver of his career. He relinquished control of operations that had once defined him. He dissolved alliances, transferred assets, and stepped down from positions that made him untouchable. To the outside world, it looked like weakness. To those who truly understood power, it looked like sacrifice. The retaliation never came. Instead, silence followed, watchful, uneasy, but restrained. Elena watched Dante from the balcony as he took a call that marked the end of something vast and unforgiving. When he hung up, his shoulders sagged slightly, the weight of years settling into his bones. "It's done," he said again. This time, the words carried finality. That night, as they sat together watching Maya draw at the kitchen table, Elena felt something she had not allowed herself since the beginning. Hope, fragile, hard-earned, real. "You didn't have to do this," she said quietly. Dante reached for her hand, intertwining their fingers. "I did," he replied. "For the first time in my life, I chose something I could lose without regret." Elena leaned into him, her head resting against his shoulder. The man beside her was no longer the untouchable force who had noticed her in a jazz club. He was someone reshaping himself in the aftermath of love. But even as warmth settled between them, Elena knew better than to believe the story was finished. Peace, in their world, was never permanent. It was earned and guarded, and always prepared to be defended. Writing peace did not arrive all at once. It settled slowly, cautiously, like something that had learned not to trust sudden quiet. The house on the cliffs felt different in the weeks that followed. Not safer, exactly, but lighter. Fewer men came and went. Conversations no longer stopped when Elena entered a room. The tension that had once coiled tightly beneath every surface loosened, replaced by a vigilant calm. Dante's world had shrunk, deliberately and irrevocably, and what remained was no longer an empire. It was a perimeter. Elena noticed the change in him before he spoke of it. He slept longer, ate meals at the table instead of standing by a window with his phone pressed to his ear. Sometimes, she would catch him watching Maya from across the room with an expression Elena had never seen on his face before the ultimatum. Not fear, not control, wonder. Maya, blissfully unaware of the cost of the choices made for her, thrived. She filled the house with sound, laughter echoing off glass and stone, her questions innocent and relentless. She tugged at Dante's hand when she wanted to show him a drawing. She climbed onto his lap without hesitation. And Dante, once so careful with distance, let her. One afternoon, as the three of them sat on the terrace overlooking the sea, Maya looked up from her coloring book and asked, "Are we staying here?" Elena held her breath. Dante answered first. "Yes," he said, "as long as you want to." Maya smiled, satisfied, and returned to her crayons. The simplicity of her acceptance struck Elena with unexpected force. Children did not need explanations about sacrifice. They understood presence. That night, when the house had settled into sleep, Elena found Dante standing on the balcony, the ocean stretching endlessly before him. The man who had once ruled from shadows now looked almost ordinary in the pale moonlight. "Do you miss it?" Elena asked quietly. He didn't pretend not to know what she meant. "Sometimes," Dante admitted. "Power leaves a mark. You don't forget the weight of it just because you set it down. Do you regret it?" He turned to her, studying her face as if searching for any trace of doubt. "No," he said without hesitation. "I regret not knowing sooner what mattered more." Elena stepped closer, resting her head against his chest, listening to the steady rhythm of his heart. "You changed everything," she said softly. "So did you." Their relationship no longer felt like a collision of worlds. It felt like something forged deliberately, shaped by shared risk and mutual surrender. Love had not saved them from danger. It had taught them how to choose what was worth protecting. Weeks later, the final confirmation arrived quietly, a message through back channels, a signal understood only by those who lived in the margins of power. The threat had moved on, not eliminated, never eliminated, but redirected. Dante read the message once, then deleted it. He did not tell Elena the details. He didn't need to. The way he exhaled, the tension leaving his shoulders, was explanation enough. That evening, they celebrated not with extravagance, but with normalcy, a simple dinner, Maya insisting on helping, music playing softly in the background. Elena sang as she cooked, her voice relaxed, unguarded, no longer shaped by fear. Dante watched her from across the room, aware that this was the life he had dismantled everything else to build. Later, when Maya had fallen asleep between them during a movie, Elena brushed her daughter's hair back and whispered, "She's safe." Dante nodded. "So are you." Elena looked at him then, really looked, at the man who had once terrified her simply by noticing her existence. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now," Dante replied. "We live." The word felt almost unreal. Living, without constant calculation, without negotiating every breath. They moved to the balcony once more, the night air cool and clean. Dante took Elena's hand, not possessively, but openly, as if no longer afraid of being seen. "Whatever comes next," he said, "we face it together, not because we have to, because we choose to." Elena squeezed his fingers, a quiet smile touching her lips. She had not found safety by stepping into Dante Russo's world. She had found it by helping him leave parts of it behind. Below them, the ocean continued its endless rhythm, indifferent to power, unafraid of loss. And for the first time since the night a stranger watched her sing in a dimly lit club, Elena felt something she had almost forgotten how to name, a future, not perfect, not untouched, but theirs.